أشراف مطلوب وطالبه لله أكرام من يمشي على قدم. العلم نور مبين يستضيء به أهل السعادات والجهال في الظلم.
The last kitab, Kitab al-Qada, the kitab pertaining to judicial rulings and legal proceedings. And this is the last kitab. The had is only for the person that drinks it. The had is only for the person that drinks it. However, the one that sells it, makes it, and we can give him what? Ta'zir. طيب. Kitab al-Qada. Kitab al-Qada. Kitab al-Qada. This is the last kitab in the book. This is the last kitab in the book. So the scholars, some of them, they end their book with Kitab al-Qada. And the last chapter you shall see is Kitab al-Iqrar, the kitab of what? Acknowledging. Or the last chapter you'll see is Kitab al-Iqrar, acknowledging and testifying against oneself. And that is a lot in the books of the Hanabila. And the reason is min bab tafa'ul, where they want the same to their, when they're dying, because when they're dying, at the end of their life, that they want to die with the Iqrar of Shahadatain. So it's like they're acknowledging that we've now finished the book, just like we've finished the book. Inshallah, we hope that our lives are finished with the Shahadatain, Iqrar of testifying La ilaha illallah. Some of the scholars, like the Shafi'i, a lot of them, they finish the book with, who studies Matnab Shuja'? Al-Itq, ahsant. Al-Itq. Al-Itq, why? Because what is Itq? It is to free a slave from being owned. So they say that we want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to free us from the Jahannam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, free us from His paradise. So some of the scholars, Sheikh Abdillah ibn Abdul Aziz al-Aqil, he says, in talking about all of the kitabs of fiqh, he says, جَعَلُوهُ فِي آخِرِ الْمُتُونِ. They've made it in the last of the mutun. Why? لَمَّا اشْتَرَوْا وَبَاعُوا فِي أَبْوَابِ الْبُيُوعِ. When they bought and they sold in the chapters to do with fiqh, with buying and selling. وَتَزَوَّجُوا, and then after they got married in كِتَابُ النِّكَاحِ, ثُمَّ طَلَّقُوا فِي كِتَابِ النِّكَاحِ, then they got married, then they divorced one another. ثُمَّ مَاتَ بَعْضُهُم, then some of them died, فَجَعَلَ لِلْآخَرِينَ, then they made for the others مِيرَاثٌ فِي كِتَابِ الْفَرَائِضِ, and some of them inherited one another. ثُمَّ جَنَى بَعْضُهُم عَلَى بَعْضٍ, and then after inheriting one another, some of them transgressed and oppressed the others. طيب, على بعد في كتاب الجنايات, in كتاب الجنايات. واغتكب, and then after that, واغتكب بعضهم, and some of them done that which ما يوجب الحد, which necessitates, some of them done that which necessitates a prescribed punishment, في كتاب الحدود. طيب. And then after that, احتاجوا للفصل بينهم في خصوماتهم. Then after doing all of that, they now require us to separate between them and judge between them in that which they have carried out. Rahimahullah ta'ala rahmatan wasi'a. طيب. والقضاء قضاء لا بد منه. والقضاء, طبعا obviously the Shaykh doesn't mention the definition, and a lot of the times he doesn't mention the definition. لكن it just means النظر بين المترافعين له للإلزام وفصل الخصومات. Al-Qada means simply to judge between people in their affairs. To judge between people in their affairs. Whether it's to do with nikah, whether it's to do with qatl, had, whether it's to do with qisas and so on. طيب? So the Qadi is the one that judges between people in their issues. مثلا طلاق and so on. Or inheritance and so on. والقضاء, the Qada, Shaykh says rahimahullah, لا بد للناس منه. It is a must that the people have qada. It is a must. Why? Because obviously when people live together, there's always going to be a time when they're going to have to go to court for something, for one reason or the other. Whether it's inheritance, whether it's two people arguing over a certain amount of wealth, whether it's two people that have conned each other out in a business venture that they had or project and so on. So they're going to need it. For huwa, it is fardu kifaya. The ruling of it is fardu kifaya. Fardu kifaya is that which is wajib upon the whole community as a whole. طيب. Like fardu ayn is that which is wajib upon every single person. And a way of differentiating between fardu kifaya and fardu Ayn, is that with fardu kifaya, the action is intended. As long as we have the action, alhamdulillah, we don't care who does it. For example, Salatul Janazah. The most important thing to us is not whether Muhammad or Abdullah or Yusuf pray Salatul Janazah. Our main concern is that this mayyit that we have, this deceased person, that there is someone that prays on him. That's our main concern. So that is how you can know fardu kifaya. As for fardu ayn, the main thing is that the person does the action. So for example, salah. A person can't say, he's prayed the 5 daily, he prayed dhuhr for me earlier on, khalas, I don't need to pray. Or my brother's going to fast for me, or my son's going to fast this whole month for me. So the action, with fardu ayn, the actual person is intended. So the Shaykh says, rahimahullah, فَهُوَ فَرْضُ كِفَايَةٍ. It is fardu kifaya. And he says, وَيَجِبُ عَلَى الْإِمَامِ, it is wajib upon the imam, نَصْبُ مَنْ يَحْصُلُ فِيهِ الْكِفَايَةِ. It is wajib upon the imam al-a'zam. Whenever you find imam in the books of fiqh, they mean the imam al-a'zam, the sultan, the khalifa. Nasbu, to say, man yahsulu fihi al-kifaya, someone who can do enough, someone who fits the bill, someone who, or enough to get the wajib over and done with. Enough for the wajib to be fulfilled. As long as the position of qada is fulfilled, then that is the most important thing. Now, if it's a small village that we live in, we only need what? Mathalan, for example, one qadi. Now, if one qadi is enough, then khalas, the imam chooses one qadi, khalas, that's fine, that's his wajib done. Like, imagine you live in a city like London. Is one enough? La. So, wherever enough becomes, that is when his obligation finishes, the obligation of the imam. So, for example, in a city like this, let's say we need 100, let's say we need a 50. Once we reach 50, that's when the responsibility is lifted off the imam. طيب. Another mas'ala, if, for qada, there are many virtues. The Prophet ﷺ said, Al-qudatu thalatha. The judges are 3. Wahidun fil jannah, wa thnani fil nar. One is in the Jannah, and two are in the fire. فَأَمَّا الَّذِي فِي الْجَنَّةِ. As for the one that is in Jannah, فَرَجُلٌ عَرَفَ الْحَقَّ فَقَضَى بِهِ. The one that is in the Jannah, the Qadi, the judge that is in the Jannah, is the one that knows the haqq, the truth, فَقَضَى بِهِ, and he judges and he rules by it. وَرَجُلٌ, and the next is وَرَجُلٌ عَرَفَ الْحَقَّ. A person, the judge, who knows the haqq, فَجَارَ فِي الْحُكْمِ فَهُوَ فِي النَّارِ. Lakin he oppresses and he doesn't judge by the sharia of Allah, then he is in the fire. وَرَجُلٌ, and a man, قَضَى لِلنَّاسِ, who gives a hukm between people, a ruling between people, عَلَى جَهْلٍ, upon ignorance. فَهُوَ فِي النَّارِ. He is in the nar, he is in the fire. So even if he gives a ruling and his ruling is correct, like he is upon ignorance, he's still in the fire. He's to be punished for that. So this hadith mentions that a qadi is in Jannah and 2 are in Jahannam. In this hadith, there's the virtue of being a qadi and the dangers of being a qadi. Now the virtue of being qadi, because if a person preserves the hudud of Allah, the boundaries of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala correctly, then that is a great reward, and he's preserving part of the religion of Allah, part of the sharia of Islam. Like someone may say, why do many of the scholars leave it off? You will find many scholars being forced to do it. Some of them in the past were lashed to do qada, and they would refuse. The reason is one of 2 reasons. Number one, either because they know that there's kifaya, there's someone that can do the kifaya, they've got enough people to do the qada, and he knows he can occupy himself with something else. That is number one. Or if it busies him from that which is better. If it busies him with from that which is better. For example, he doesn't want to go into the affairs of people. He just wants to teach people the haqq, spread, give fatwa, and so on and so forth. So therefore, many of the scholars, rahmatullahi alayhim, they say we don't want to be qudat. طيب. The next mas'ala that you may ask is, what is the difference between al-qadi and al-mufti? Al-qadi, the one that judges between people, and the mufti, the one that gives a fatwa. What do they share in common? Tabyinul haqq. Both of them share in common that they're elaborating the haqq, they're conveying the haqq. They're teaching people the haqq, or they're informing people of the haqq. Lakin they differ in many things. So write a title, The Difference Between a Mufti and a Qadi. The first is that the Qadi not only clarifies the haqq, he gives the answer, the correct ruling, but he makes it binding as well. The Qadi's ruling is binding. The Qadi's ruling is binding. The Qadi's ruling is binding. Whereas the Mufti, he's just giving you a fatwa. Whether you take it or not, it's up to you. Whether you take it or not, it's up to you. So in the Sharia, what the Qadi says is binding. So for example, just as an example, a man and his wife, they go to court. And they talk about expenses and so on that he has to provide, she has custody and he has to provide for them and so on. طيب. The Qadi in the Mahkamah says, you have to pay X amount of money every month. Let's say you have to pay £5,000 a month to the family, to your wife and so on, or to your ex and the child. Because that is a ruling that's come from the Qadi, it is binding upon that man to now pay whatever he was told to pay. Like, what if he goes to a sheikh? He goes, Sheikh, I want to ask you something, right? Me and my wife had a dispute on this and so on, and I have this children. And then the sheikh, well, I'm mad. Maybe about, if you give him about £5,000, it's enough. That is not binding upon him. He can say, no, I'm not paying 5,000. He can leave. And he's not blameworthy for that, because it is a fatwa. Because it is a fatwa. So one is binding and one isn't binding. One is binding and one isn't binding. The second difference is that the fatwa of the Mufti is a hukum that is am. The fatwa of the Mufti that is given the fatwa, it is general. It relates to him and other than him. It relates to him and other than him. Whereas the ruling of the Qadi is only specific to that individual. Is only specific to that individual. So the Mufti can give a general, because the Mufti, all he's doing is telling the hukum, saying the hukum as it is. As for the technicalities and the differences in scenarios, that's not his job. Like in the Qadi, he's now telling people, right, because of your situation, and because you've done this, and because of this, he'll mention personal things connected to them, and he'll give them a tailor-made hukum. That tailor-made hukum cannot be applied elsewhere. The Qadi gives a tailor-made hukum, and that tailor-made hukum can't be given a general ruling, and it can't be given to anyone else. Also, the third difference is the answer that the Mufti gives you, you can give it to other people. Like in the hukum that the Qadi gives you, you can't say, listen, one size fits all. This Hakim said this, let's apply this everywhere else. So, mathalan, you go to court after that dispute with your wife and he says you have to pay X amount of money. Your friend divorces his wife 3 weeks later, you say, listen, you don't even need to go to court. 3 weeks ago, I went to court, he said this to me, so take this now. Questions after. What is it, connected to this? Yeah, that's something else. That's something else. That's something else. So that is the third difference. That is the third difference. طيب. The next difference is the Mufti, he can give a fatwa to his family. He can give it to his usul and his furu'. You know what usul and furu' are? Usul are what? And furu'. Furu'. Those people that are talking about Bughat, if you say to them usul, they might think you're talking about usul al-fiqh. طيب. So the person, the Mufti, he can give a fatwa to his father, to his mother. طيب. He can give a fatwa to his son, his daughter. He can give a fatwa to his wife. Like when it comes to the Qadi can't give a ruling for his usul and his furu', or his zawja, or anyone that there can be a tuhma, a suspicion. Anywhere where there can be a tuhma, a suspicion. Because obviously a person, naturally, he's inclined to stick up for his family, his father and son, and so on. طيب. The next fifth one is حكم القاضي لا يجوز نقضه. This is where Mubarak comes in. حكم القاضي, the Qadi comes with a hukum, it is not permissible to say, خلاص, you know what, your hukum is not even valid anyway. There's a stronger opinion there. The Qadi, la, we can't say that. You came to him in the first place, whatever fatwa he gives you, you have to take it, it's binding. Lakin the fatwa of the Mufti, A person can go to another Mufti and get another answer, and he can apply that. He can go to another Mufti and he can apply that. Or the Mufti himself, he can say, listen, the fatwa I gave you last week, it was a mistake, or I've changed my opinion, do that. That's a fatwa. But the Qadi, he can't do that. He can't say, the hukum that I gave last week, change it to this. طيب. طيب. The next mas'ala, the Shaykh says, rahimahullah, or the next mas'ala that we're going to talk about, inshallah, is shurudul Qadi, the conditions of the Qadi. Conditions of the Qadi. And the Shaykh doesn't talk about this. He mentions adab al-Qadi, what is expected from the Qadi, lakin there's also shurud al-Qadi, the conditions for the Qadi. Number one, al-Islam. He has to be a Muslim. قال جل وعلا وَلَنْ يَجْعَلَ اللَّهُ لِلْكَافِرِينَ عَلَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ سَبِيلًا. Allah Jalla wa Ala won't make a path for the believers over the Muslims, and the kuffar over the believers. So the first one is al-Islam. A second is at-taklif. The person has to be mukallaf. Mukallaf consists of what? Aqil, baligh. A person who has reached puberty and a person who is sane. The third condition for a Qadi is al-Dhukuriyya, or al-Dhukura. He has to be male. He has to be male. قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم لن يفلح قوم ولوا أمرهم امرأة. A people who allow a woman to take lead, to be their wali, the guardian over them, will not succeed. So it is haram, any wilaya for women to take. And this has not only been the sharia, like in even the practice of the Muslims from the time of the Salaf rahmatullah alayhim. And all of the righteous women, they never actually said, we want to be hukam. Or we want to be what? We want to govern the Muslims. Those righteous Muslims I'm talking about. Those righteous female Muslims from the past. The sahabiyat. Those women that came after them. The tabi'iyat. Atba'u tabi'iyat and so on. Right? So it is not permissible for a woman, whether it's in a court, whether it's in a land, whether it's the masjid, the khutbah, that wilayah is not given. Some of the Hanafiya, rahmatullahi alayhim, radiyallahu anhum, they say that a woman can judge in the affairs that women can be witnesses over. Women can judge in the affairs that women can be witnesses over. We shall see who can be a witness and what not in what next week, inshallah. Like for those things that women can be witnesses over, for example, mal, people having disputes over mal, if there are two women arguing over it, then they can dispute, they can judge between women. Like the stronger opinion is that the opinion of the Jumhur, which is not permissible. The third, al-adala. The person has to be a person who is just. The person has to be a person who is just. طيب قال جل وعلا ومن قتله منكم متعمدا فجزاؤه مثل ما قتل من النعم يحكم به ذوى عدل منكم. ذوى عدل منكم, when we were talking about Sayd, when we studied Sayd in Kitab al-Hajj. طيب. The last or the next condition is al-ijtihad. A person has to be a mujtahid. A person has to be a mujtahid. And this mas'ala is a mas'ala where the scholars differ a lot on. Because some of them lay down conditions for the mujtahid that are almost impossible. To the extent that some scholars say that even if you were to find, you can't find them in some of the companions or some of the scholars. So some of them lay down strong conditions for the mujtahid. Lakin, the reality is that a person, as long as they know the hukum shari'i, the legal ruling, and they know the waqi' of the nas, as we shall see, the situation of the people and so on, then they can be a qadi. Like just as a benefit, let's look at the conditions for a person to be a mujtahid. Conditions for a person to be a mujtahid. The first one, أن يعلم من الأدلة الشرعية ما يحتاج إليها. The very first one, and I'm going to mention it briefly, is that the person must know from the evidences of the sharia that which he needs. The evidences of the sharia. So for example, in the Quran, there's something called ayatul ahkam, verses dealing with rulings. These ayatul ahkam are about 500 in number. And they are dealing with the rulings pertaining to parts of the sharia. So for example, Surah to Yusuf, or the qisas in general, they don't really have ayatul ahkam in them, in a lot of the time. So ayatul ahkam are those ayat that have the ahkam. Also those ahadith that pertain to the rulings. Why? Because if a person doesn't know these evidences from the sharia, how can he judge? It's impossible. If he doesn't know, for example, the Hadd al-Hiraba that we just studied, the highway robbers, if he doesn't know the verse, how is he going to give a ruling? طيب. The second condition is that he must know what it relates to the hadith in terms of whether a hadith is authentic or weak. The authenticity and the weakness of the hadith. Number 3, he must know nasikh wal mansukh. He must know that which in the Sharia we know there's something nasikh mansukh, which we shall see in Usul al-Fiqh. Verses that have been abridged. The verses that have been abrogated, verses that have been sometimes the ruling has been lifted. So sometimes we recite them, but that hukum is no longer there. That hukum is no longer there. So he must know the ruling of these ahkam. طيب. Also from the things that the scholars mention is that he must know mawatin al-ijma', where the scholars have had ijma' and where the scholars have had difference of opinion. Because if a person doesn't know the mawatin al-ijma', where the scholars have, where there's consensus of among the scholars, if he doesn't know this, then he might break an ijma'. He might break or he might go against an ijma'. And that's not acceptable for the mujtahid to go against an ijma'. Or for the mufti or the alim or anyone to go against ijma', it is muharram. Also, the person must know a decent amount of, in the a fair amount of lugha al-Arabiya and usul al-fiqh, in order to know dalalat al-alfad, in order to know what words demonstrate and what they show. Dalalat al-alfad. For example, am, general, khas, specific, mutlaq, unrestricted, muqayyad, restricted. So he has to know these evidences, because there are evidences that are general and then there are evidences that are specific. And if you can't tell the difference between the two, then there's going to be a problem. طيب. Then the Shaykh says, rahimahullah, it is wajib for him to allocate مِمَّن لَهُ مَعْرِفَةٌ بِالْقَضَاءِ بِمَعْرِفَةِ الْأَحْكَامِ الشَّرْعِيَّةِ. It is compulsory that the Imam chooses someone who knows judicial rulings بِمَعْرِفَةِ الْأَحْكَامِ, by knowing the rulings of the Sharia, by knowing the rulings of the Sharia, وَتَطْبِيقَهَا عَلَى الْوَقَائِعِ الْجَارِيَّةِ بَيْنَ النَّاسِ. So not only does he know the hukum of the Sharia, lakin he knows the implications of that, and he can apply that in the situation of the people, in that which is between the people. طيب. So the Qadi, he must know 3 things. تصور المسألة. Number 1, the Qadi must know 3 things. تصور المسألة. He must be able to picture the mas'ala at hand. That's why you've heard a lot of times وصورة المسألة. وصورة المسألة. Because if you can't picture the mas'ala, then what? خلاص, you won't know. And they say الحكم على شيء فرع عن تصوره. If you want to give a ruling on something, you must understand it in the first place. You must understand it in the first place. If you don't know the difference between a sariqah, if you don't know the difference between whether a person has stolen or whether a person is a highway robber, are you able to give the hukum shari'i? No, you're not. Because highway robbing has a different hukum and sariqah, stealing, has a different hukum. The next is al-ilm bil-hukm shari'i. The person has to be able to know the hukum shari'i, the legal ruling of that mas'ala. And the third is تطبيق القضية على الأحكام الشرعية. He must be able to connect the surah al-mas'ala, the waqi' that has happened, and the hukum of the mas'ala, the hukum of whatever it is, that the issue that is being discussed, and then actually apply that. So he must know these. He must know these things, these 3 things. That's why a lot of times the Qadi, he must be from the community of that person. He must be from the Qadi of the community of the people that he's judging between. Because sometimes they might actually use a certain word for a different meaning. So it is not ideal to take a Qadi, a judge from the UK, and you put him in somewhere in the middle of Asia or in the middle of Africa. Because a lot of times the waqi' of that situation, that place, he might not know. So the Shaykh says, rahimahullah, وَعَلَيْهِ, and it's wajib upon the Imam, and yuwalliya, that he gives the Qadi, the guardianship, the qada, to al-amthala fal-amthala fi as-sifat al-mu'tabarati fi al-Qadi. He needs to give the Qadi needs to choose, or the Imam needs to choose a person, the most befitting person for the role. And then, al-amthal fal-amthal. If we don't have a person that fits the bill 100%, but we find someone who fits the bill 80%, then we choose him. If we don't have someone that can even fulfill the post 80% of the needs, like he can fulfill 60% of the conditions, then we choose him, because we don't have anyone else. Or we have someone who can fulfill 50% of the role, but that's about it. That is about it. So for example, a person who applies the sunnah of the Prophet, practices the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and a mubtadi'. If you've got a Sunni, a Salafi that knows the ahkam of the Sharia, and you've got a mubtadi', an innovator that knows the ahkam of Sharia, who are you going to allocate? The Sunni. What if you don't have the Sunni here? There's no one. But you've only got a mubtadi' that knows the hukum Shari'i at the very least, and he understands the waqi'. Then you choose him because he's what? He's just what is there. If you've got someone that shaves his beard and someone that, mashallah, leaves his beard, who are you going to choose? The one that leaves his beard, that practices the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, because obviously they're the same in the hukum. And the one that doesn't shaves, khalas, you leave him. But like, what if you're in a place where the best person, the most righteous person with the least amount of evil is the one that shaves his beard? The rest are a bunch of alcoholics and junkies, and some of them don't have any understanding in the Sharia. It's just the best of what you got, the best of a bad bunch. So you choose whoever can fulfill that person, who can fulfill that position. That's why the Shaykh says, rahimahullah, yuwalli al-amthal fal-amthal. Where al-amthal, the best or the most that can fulfill those positions, fi sifat al-mu'tabara, in those. طيب. So there are other etiquettes that the scholars mention. For example, they say that the Qadi, he needs to be someone who's strong, someone who has hayba, someone who is strong, and someone who is respected. Also, he has to be a person that is halim. He has to be a person that has forbearance, someone that is patient. He has to be someone that is patient. Also, from the etiquettes of the Qadi is that he has to be someone who that is not hasty. He's got that he doesn't rush towards things. So, for example, if you've got a judge, and then this person says, a woman comes and says, my husband beat me up. Because you beat her up now. Or the wife says, my husband chopped my hand off. Because you chopped his hand, khalas, chop his hand off. Khalas, take him, chop his hand off. Nah. He needs to ask, what has taken place? Did he accidentally cut your hand off? Did he not see that you was there? Khalas, hand off. Khalas, doesn't work. طيب. Also, they say, from the things that they say, that his court, his place of judging has to be in the middle of the city. Wasadul Medina. Why Wasadul Medina? Why in the middle? So that everyone can reach him. So that what? Everyone can reach him. And it is not difficult upon some people and easy upon some people. طيب. Also, from the etiquette that they mention is that he doesn't give a hukum when he's angry. He doesn't give a hukum. The hadith was لا يحكم القاضي وهو غضبان أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم. The person that is angry, he doesn't give a ruling. They mention other things. What other things can come into? I want 2 from the brothers and 2 from the sisters. Brothers. I want someone. تفضل عبد العزيز. Drunk, طيب. So anger, we have evidence from the hadith. Evidence from the hadith, anger. Then we will now want to go over to something that shares the hukum, the ruling, the illah, the reason. So the brother said, when a person is drunk, sahih, jayd. Although you shouldn't have a qadi that is drunk in the first place. طيب. Sulaiman. Hungry, excellent. If a person is hungry, he's going to be thinking about food, then khalas. These people that are sitting in front of them, he sees them as pieces of meat. He's hungry. Sisters, 2 other examples. Naam, if he needs to go to the bathroom, khalas. Because if he needs to go to the bathroom, he's just going to say, Dahina, quickly, go. And then. So he's busy with something else. His mind is preoccupied. He's busy with something else. What else? And that could be many different things. Oh, excellent. Sah. These fuqaha, mashallah, all of you. When it's extremely hot or when it's extremely cold. When it's extremely hot. Because he can be going like that. Go on quickly. What did you say? Khalas. We'll chop your hand off. Call it a day. It just won't work. Therefore, when it's extremely hot, when it's extremely cold. What else? Excellent. Extreme happiness. Method, people can come to him for qisas. One killed another. And he can be extremely happy. And the family who have just now lost the person, the father's been killed. He goes, listen guys, wallahi, the world is very short, it's temporary, it's not worth anything. Khalas. Call it quits, take the diya. He's not befitting. Where else? He's tired. Na'am, when he's tired, he shouldn't. That's why in the morning he should be judging in the morning, like at any time in the afternoon, he shouldn't. Unless he's had qaylula. Sahih, jazakallah khair. Grieving, when he's grieving, na'am. When he's grieving. Because he's obviously, his mind is mashghul. Being forced, al-ikrah, sahih. Al-ikrah, also being forced. If he's ill, as the sister said, also health, when he's ill, sahih, he shouldn't. Anything that can preoccupy his mind. And write that ba'ida down. Al-hukmu yaduru ma'al illati wujudun wa adama. Al-hukmu, ruling, yaduru ma'a, it goes around with الحكم يدور مع العلة with the illah, with the reason وجودا وعدما, whether it's there. If we find the illah, then the hukum is there. If we don't find the illah, then the hukum is not there. طيب. Also from the things that they mention is that when the two people come in, and we shall study that next week inshallah, you can't say to them, one of them, أهلا وسهلا ومرحبا ما شاء الله أهلا كيف حالكم طيب الحمد لله. Greet them, and then the other one says, Alaykum salam. Sit down. You can't do that. Why? Because it's not fair. Because you've already kind of laid down the bearings for them to what? Nah, you're going to be biased from that point onwards. Also, from the things they say is that you can't take hadaya, you can't take gifts. The Qadi can't take a gift. Because if you take a gift, that is going to blur the judgment. That is going to blur the judgment. So for example, someone gives you a brand new Bentley, and he goes and kills someone, of course you're not going to kill him after that. Gives you a Bentley and you kill him, it doesn't make sense. But you're going to be saying to them, take the deer, just because you don't want him to be killed. That is why it's not permissible. Then the Shaykh says, rahimahullah, وَيَتَعَيَّنُ عَلَى مَنْ كَانَ أَهْلًا. Now, you can write a title, a subtitle, مَتَى يَجِبُ الْقَضَاءُ عَلَى الْفَرْدِ. مَتَى يَجِبُ الْقَضَاءُ عَلَى الْفَرْدِ. Mata, when? Yajibu, does it become wajib? Al-qada, does qada become wajib? Al-fard, upon an individual. The Shaykh says, rahimahullah, وَيَتَعَيَّنُ عَلَى مَنْ كَانَ أَهْلًا. It becomes wajib upon the one who is able to be the qadi. Number one, he's ahl. When does it become wajib upon a person? If he's mu'ahal lihada, if he's qualified. وَلَمْ يُوجَدْ غَيْرُهُ. The second condition is that there isn't anyone else that can fulfill that role. He is qualified and there's no one else. وَلَمْ يَشْغَلْهُ عَمَّا هُوَ أَهَمْ مِنْهُ. And it doesn't preoccupy him from that which is more important for him. If these three conditions are met, then what? Then it is not wajib to. If these three conditions are met, then it is wajib upon an individual. Why does the Shaykh say this now? وَيَتَعَيَّنُ. Why does he say it is wajib upon an individual, this, in these conditions? Choice? Excellent, because previously he said it was fardu kifaya. So there's no tanaqud. He said there was fardu kifaya, it's wajib upon everyone. But now he's saying to you, like, ya jama'ah, there's a certain situation where it becomes wajib upon you as an individual. When you are qualified and there's no one else to carry out that role, and it doesn't preoccupy you from something else. So for example, if there's 20 qudat in the country, in the city, it's not wajib upon you. If you're not even qualified, it's not wajib upon you. If it occupies you from something that is wajib, then again, it is not wajib upon you. The last question is after in a second. The last mas'ala is صور تولية القضاء. صور تولية القضاء أو تولية القاضي. And this relates to what we give the hakim what can we let him judge between? What can we let the Qadi judge in? So the Imam is of three types. The Imam can say to him, I give you the Qadi, you can be the Hakim, you can rule here, you can rule in this country, anywhere in this country, and you can judge in any issues. Any mas'ala, in any place you can judge. You go to Makkah, you can be the Qadi. You can judge. You go to Riyadh, you can be the Qadi. You go to Medina, you're the Qadi. So that is what? The place is am, and the mas'ala is am. Then, the next mas'ala is that he says, I give you the ahkam of the sharia, all the ahkam of the sharia, whether it's divorce, qisas, inheritance, wherever it may be, make that general the ahkam, lakin in Makkah only. Lakin in Makkah only. So the first was general ahkam and general place. The second was what? General ahkam, all types of ahkam, but in a specific place. The next is the opposite, or another, to give him specific masail in Makkah. So for example, you say to him, you're only dealing with any khilaf to do with nikah in Makkah. Any khilaf to do with Makkah. Any khilaf to do with nikah in Makkah. And the third is, or the fourth type is, if you say to them, I will give you the Qadi, you can judge in nikah, a specific mas'ala nikah, anywhere in the country. Makkah, Medina, Riyadh, Tabuk, so on. Wherever you go, you're the judge, but you're only to judge in nikah. You're only to judge in nikah. طيب. Alhamdulillah, that's inshallah where I wanted to stop today. And next week we start from Da'awah, and we shall finish the book inshallah next week.
وقل رب زدني